We're going to have, as the American colonists had, help from abroad. They relied on the French. We are going to have to rely on the Americans.
Hey everybody, PJ here. Got a powerful episode lined up today on the Alberta independence front. First up, we hear from Professor Barry Cooper from the University of Calgary. He breaks down Alberta's rocky relationship with Ottawa and how we got to this point. Then we have a clip from my recent conversation with the crew at Faith the Nation. We dive into growing American support for Alberta's independence, including talk of Alberta possibly becoming the 51st state. We also cover when the real referendum vote might actually happen and how crucial international recognition is, especially since reports indicate that the Trump administration would be willing to recognize Alberta's independence. And finally, we hear from constitutional lawyer Keith Wilson, who in a recent interview explained why the U.S. is likely to recognize an independent Alberta. All that and other details you're not going to want to miss. Let's get into the video. Very quickly though, if you enjoy these videos, please do me a solid and subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. Thank you, and back to the video.
Call a referendum on separation. Cooper maintains it's time for a new relationship with Ottawa. It's time to reset the agreement in Confederation, one that was established to ensure Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Northwest Territories would never have the power base needed to dictate the direction of their own territories, let alone that of the country. I invited Professor Barry Cooper to join me for a conversation that matters about Alberta's mistreatment by Ottawa from the moment it was created. Professor Cooper, welcome. And thank you for joining me for this very important conversation about Western alienation, Alberta in particular, and the Prairie provinces in general. What is your sense of where we are at in terms of mood?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't call it alienation. I'd call it injustice, and I'd call it a growing awareness of a kind of structural injustice that has been part of what is now the Western Canadian experience from the period from before Confederation. I've written a fair bit about this, and it's something that's not going to go away. So far as I'm concerned, there's no kind of compromise within Confederation that Laurentian Canada would be willing to accept. They've never accepted that Westerners, whether they were Indians, Métis, settlers from the Orkneys, the Hebrides, the old Hudson Bay people, were ever partners. They've even had problems with BC, but nothing compared to what it's been like from what's now the Prairie province.
You know, common sense dictates that you do not negotiate from a position of weakness. It also tells us that those who have taken power don't just simply give it back. Something many Canadians and even Albertans ignore is for how long Western provinces have been trying to get a fair deal out of Confederation. Alberta, specifically, has tried multiple ways, multiple times, and for multiple decades, with little to no success. So the notion that we can try to fix Canada from inside is nothing more than wishful thinking. Names like Peter Lougheed, Preston Manning, and even Stephen Harper come to mind on a long list of Canadians and proud Albertans who have tried to get a fair shake out of the rest of Canada, but ended up hitting a wall. Those who hold the power will never just give it away.
From, conservative standpoint, for me, being a conservative and being Christian and obviously loving my country, I'm actually rooting for Alberta's independence, but I would think that it would be really cool for Alberta itself to possibly become the 51st state. What is your take on the Alberta situation? Would you prefer complete independence, or are you hoping for a 51st state? Where do you kind of lean in all of that?
Well, personally, I'm just open-minded. I believe, as a base level, that Alberta, for one, culturally and even geographically, just aligns better with the United States. You look at the culture of Albertans today, and even for the past 100 years, we definitely have a lot more in common with people in Montana, Idaho, Texas. A good 25% of the ranchers when Alberta was being settled came from Oklahoma, Texas, and Montana. So historically, there's that connection there. But the way I view it is I'm open-minded. We definitely need to probably go at the Texas way first. I don't mean the violence part. I mean becoming a country first. We need to see how that goes. We need to see how we do, whether we can stand on our own 2 feet. But what I can say is also that that is something that would likely be put to a vote once Alberta gets to that point. If there's a large enough amount of the population of the new, Alberta citizens, if you will, that want to become a part of the United States, well, there's probably going to be some sort of negotiation. Would I prefer being part of the United States as opposed to staying in the situation that Alberta's in today? Yes. But I also want to find out what an independent nation of Alberta looks like.
When is the referendum going to happen? Is it going to happen? Do you guys have pictures? How's that working?
Well, it's before the courts now. I don't know if you heard, but the Elections Alberta, the bureaucrats in there decided to send it for further analysis of its constitutionality, basically adding red tape, creating some sort of a delay tactic to make things, to have the anti-independence one take the spotlight. We'll see how that works. But yeah, it's before the courts now. Elections Alberta, APP deposited into Elections Alberta, and the bureaucrat, the top guy, sent it before a judge. That's already in the process. There's going to be hearings. The lawyers from the APP are going to be making the case that it is constitutional. It actually should take precedent over the other one because it's an actual constitutional question as opposed to a policy question. We're still aiming for spring of 2026 to get that referendum going.
You said 60% of her base is supporting of separation, annexing, whatever it's called, so on and so forth. So, like, real world, in terms of Alberta population, what do those numbers dissolve into? What does it look like when you talk about when you go to Starbucks or in the street? Is this like a realistic thing in terms of random conversations and random chatter that's happening in the real world?
They did a poll recently. 2/3 of her base support Alberta independence, but that doesn't mean 2/3 of Albertans. There's been polling which tells us kind of where we're at, more or less. The lowest polling has shown that 1/3 of Albertans, that's 33%. And mind you, this pollster, because not all polls are created equal, right? You know that a lot of them come with their own biases. So 100%. This pollster is left-leaning, heavy left-leaning, and he put it at 33%, unprecedented. It's never gone up that high. And then a more centrist to right-leaning pollster had it mid-40s. I'm talking 45, I think. Which, again, this is a real number. And obviously the cities is a bit more difficult because cities tend to be more left-leaning. But you go to rural Alberta, and a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are putting down those maple leaves and raising Alberta flags. A lot of Albertans feel like there's just no hope here. So you can hear it at the doors, mostly in rural and the suburbs. The cities, not so much. And that's what we're working towards, is to educate people in the cities.
I want it to happen. But am I not correct that, like, over here in the U.S., just to let you in, we'd have to have a 2/3 of all the states essentially vote, similar to like a constitutional amendment. I don't really know what the process would be. But just in my, because I'm only smart because of AI nowadays. But when I AI'd it, I think it was telling me that there was a dominant percentage of the provinces would also have to vote to allow you out of the union. Is that not correct, or can you enlighten us on that?
It's never been done before, so it's uncharted territory. But what the law says, which is called the Clarity Act, and they created that law because Quebec came so close, right? So they had to create a law like, okay, what if these people got to that 50% plus one vote, right? What would have happened? Yeah, they would have to enter into negotiations. That's what the law says. Albertans vote as a majority to separate from Canada. Canada would have to negotiate. It doesn't say that they could just say no. And a big difference maker is that at that point, if there's a stalemate, what makes Alberta a nation is international recognition. So if you have any major country, and I would dare say a little neighbor to the south, which is the most powerful country on earth, indicating what Canada just indicated for Palestine, that they're going to recognize it as a state, a two-state solution, if you will, then we have all the chips. And like Trump would say, we have all the cards. They have no cards. If the USA says we're going to recognize their independence, they have no cards. I've covered this topic of international recognition on this channel several times, and it ain't coincidental. My goal is to drive home just how crucial this is in this process Albertans are about to go through. After a successful referendum, the next most important event that makes Alberta a country on that very day is receiving international recognition from other nation states. And if it just so happens that Albertans get this acknowledgement from the most powerful nation on earth, then there's little to nothing Canada can do other than start packing their bags and getting them out of Albertan territory.
So under law in Canada, because of the 1998 reference case and the Federal Clarity Act, it says that once there is a successful vote on a clear question by a province to succeed, then the other provinces, First Nations, and the federal government are under a positive legal duty to enter into good faith negotiations as to the terms upon which the province will become an independent country. I do not expect good faith negotiations. I expect them to thwart things, force court applications. So, well, why am I optimistic that this could still happen then if I'm of the view that the federal government may not enter into good faith negotiations? But the most important one is the United States. So paragraph 155 of the Supreme Court of Canada decision talks about this scenario, and it hints at if the federal government and the other parties don't enter into good faith negotiations, it doesn't preclude international recognition. It does not preclude other countries giving unilateral international recognition to Alberta in this instance, right? Well, the APP sent a delegation down several months ago to meet with a delegation of the U.S. State Department in Washington, and they indicated to that APP delegation that they believe that the Trump administration would be prepared, following a successful referendum, to acknowledge statehood, independence of Alberta.
All right, thanks for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Special thanks to those of you who have donated to this project. It is much appreciated, and it helps me continue making videos. See you on the next one. Peace.